Okay, this is my narrative unit presentation of Jin and Jesse, and the two movies I chose were Civil War and Rogue One. So, Civil War was directed by Alex Garland and produced by A24. It is a hypothetical civil war in the modern day US. It basically asks, like, what if a few states decided to secede today and fight the federal government? It focuses on four central characters. There's the protagonist, Jesse, who is like a young, aspiring war photographer. And then she kind of has like three mentor characters that she goes through the movie with. There's Joel, who is an older, more experienced reporter. There's Lee, who is kind of like who's one of Jesse's heroes. She is a war photographer, a famous war photographer who's been doing it for many years. And there's Sammy, who is once again another reporter who's been doing this for many years and is also reporting on the Civil War. Their main goal is to interview the president before the government falls. In here, the writing is on the wall. Basically, people know the federal government is going to fall, and their goal is to get to the president and interview him, get to DC, interview the president, and do that before the federal government falls. This movie mostly follows Jesse's point of view. She develops the most, and you really get to see into Jesse's mind the most. It's a POV narrative structure. The other movie I chose was Rogue One. Rogue One is a Star Wars spin-off movie. Takes place just before Star Wars Episode 4. It ends just before Episode 4 starts. Kind of tells the story of how that movie started. It focuses on four central characters. There is Jyn Erso, who's the main protagonist, who is Galen Erso's daughter. Galen Erso is like an imperial scientist or an engineer who created the Death Star. There's Cassian Andor, who is a captain in the Rebel Alliance. And there is Saw Gerrera, who for a time kind of acted like a foster parent for Jyn after her father was taken by the Empire to build the Death Star. And once again, all these characters kind of have like a mentor-like influence, but especially Cassian does. Their goal is to steal the plans for the Death Star. Galen left a message saying that he put a flaw in the Death Star, and they need the plans of the Death Star to be able to take that flaw and destroy the Death Star. This movie is very clearly a quest narrative structure, and it follows the characters as they try to get those plans. Between Rogue One and Civil War, Jesse from Civil War changes the most because the POV narrative reveals how one becomes desensitized to the horrific events of war. It's really not a positive change. Jesse does really become desensitized and kind of reverts back, and you'll see more when I get it more in depth to that explanation. So, first of all, POV versus quest. Civil War is from Jesse's point of view. She definitely gets more development than the other cast members, and she has the most clear character arc and the most clear development. The movie uses the goal, like the journey, as a way to develop the characters. Like in each scene in the movie, it's more about how the characters react to that, how the characters react and deal with and develop from a particular moment. And some focus is kind of taken away from that overarching journey to laser in on like a particular moment. Also, Jesse's photography, she takes a lot of pictures, and some of those pictures show up on screen, and when you see that, you get to see exactly what she was taking a picture of, and that gives you a better understanding of her inner thoughts. You get to literally see what she was seeing, and you get to consider, why she was taking that picture and what she thought was important about it. So for Rogue One, it's a quest type. All members of Rogue One, like the group Rogue One, have a clear character arc. They all kind of have a starting, some kind of development, and an end. The film really centers around their final mission, like the point of the movie, and it's repeated. Obviously, they're always they're working against the clock to get those Death Star plans. They stay as a group. Even when the characters are split up towards the end of the movie, it never really, like, they're always in contact with each other, and they kind of face their problems together. It doesn't really, there are a few moments where it lasers in on one character, but largely they stay together. And because of this, you get to see into all of them. You get to see internal conflicts and really all of the different characters, like Jyn, Cassian, Bodhi too, really all of them. Lee and Cassian, these two mentor characters for both Jesse and Jyn respectively have a lot of similarities. I think it's pretty interesting to see them. So As a mentor, both of them are very experienced. They've been in their field for many years. Um, because of that, they're kind of out of touch. They both do very hard jobs. Cassian is like, you know, he's an assassin. He does the dirty work basically for the rebellion. He's an assassin, a saboteur, and it's been hard on him, obviously. Jesse is a photographer photographing these horrific events of war, and that also takes a big toll on her. Because of this, they really don't like taking risks. They understand how dangerous their work is, and they just want to get in and get out, just, do what they have to, and don't want to spend any more time there because they don't, they like the results of their work. They do their work because they do it for a good cause. Honestly, Cassian freeing the galaxy, and for Lee it's to send a message home, but they don't like the work necessarily. They like what they get from it. Both of them let their work consume them as well. They really just they're all about their work. They don't really have a personal life, and they let it consume them. So throughout their development, you'll see how there's a lot of similarities and both differences between Jin and Jesse, and they're almost like yin and yang, where Jin has more of a positive development, Jesse's is more negative, but it's both kind of similar. So for Jin's development, the first scene is when Jin and Saw speak about the rebellion in his hideout. They haven't seen each other for years. Saw asks her, "Have you joined the cause?" Meaning the rebellion, and she basically laughs this off. She obviously doesn't like the Empire, but then you also learn that she doesn't like the Empire, but she also doesn't like the rebellion. Why is that? You find out Saw abandoned Jin when she was 16, so she's kind of been hurt from both sides, and she just is not happy with it at all. She's kind of indifferent now. So how is this scene made? What's how was it crafted? There's different lighting between both of the characters. Kind of highlights their clashing views. You can see how Jin's kind of in this dark area, and there's this big bright window behind Saw, kind of showing how Saw has a more positive outlook towards the rebellion, and he's kind of more optimistic about it, and Jin is very pessimistic. Once again, very close shots in their faces kind of draw focus and let you read their body language to understand their emotions better. The characters are mostly in the center of the frame, kind of on the rule of thirds, up in the kind of Jin is in the upper left, and Saw is kind of towards the upper right, and it kind of focuses in on them. There's also a lack of background music, and this helps draw attention to the characters and what they're saying. The director really wants you to focus on the characters themselves. Why is this important? It establishes Jin's indifference towards the Empire. She really doesn't care, honestly, that much about the Empire and whether or not the rebellion succeeds. She's been hurt by both sides of the war. She's kind of reverted to this selfish mindset where she's just like, I just want to be left alone. I don't care what happens. It's very much the antithesis of her father. Her father was taken by the Empire, and instead of the Empire also killed his wife. And instead of giving up, he decided to try and do something about it, and built a flaw into the Death Star. So they're very much opposites. Jin is really only motivated by the chance to see her father and being freed. It's, once again, very selfish. She's not doing it for any other cause. She just cares about what she can get out of it. For the second scene, this is when Jin is trying to convince the Alliance Council to send troops to Scarif. She stands up for her opinion in front of dozens of people. The other council members, unfortunately, don't really believe her. She's very new to the rebellion. This whole movie takes place over just a few days. It's very quickly paced. They either don't believe her, or they think the risk is too great. They don't really trust her, and she tries to get support to send troops to Scarif because that's where the Death Star plans is. But unfortunately, she doesn't really find any support. How is this scene made? What decisions make it the way it is? It's this really crowded room. There's a lot of people around it, and a lot of people are crowded around there to kind of give it a sense of importance. They're obviously like working against the clock to get these Death Star plans, and it's a really stressful time. And everybody's trying to work together to get any idea of how can we stop the Death Star? How can we say this? Because obviously the Death Star is this huge weapon. There's a lot of background noise, and there's also some like hecklers in the background when Jin is talking, kind of establishing this like one versus many, David versus Goliath kind of thing. Jin is trying to convince all these other people, and she's doesn't really end up succeeding. Once again, there's no background music to help you focus on the characters, and there's this kind of focused lighting. As you can see in the top picture, Jin's face is brighter than all of the others, and all the other faces are out of focus, kind of just singling in on her and how she's the only one that's really arguing for her side. And then you can see in this wider shot with all of the other alliance members, the light is all in them, kind of showing how they're all in agreement and they are all kind of working against her. That's like one versus many, David versus Goliath. Why is this scene important? Jin now believes in the cause. She really wants to help. Her morals have changed. She kind of now is less selfish and kind of understands that, for the greater good mindset that her father and Cassian also have. And she really wants to pursue that. She's now being selfless instead of selfish. And this scene kind of wraps up her character arc. Like, she's now grown. She now sees why she should work to help the greater good. And she's now devoted herself to the rebellion, and she's fighting for a better future. For Jesse's development, the first scene I chose was, this is right after a protest that both Jesse and Lee are at, and Lee gives Jesse a high-vis jacket, and Jesse wants to give it back to her, so she tracks her down at this hotel with lots of other reporters. Yeah, she tries to give back the high-vis vest and admits to Lee that Lee is one of her heroes. Lee turns down this vest and kind of tells Jesse, keep that vest, buy some body armor, and just stay safe. Lee kind of talks down to Jesse, and you can kind of tell how like Lee is Lee doesn't really see how Jesse has it in her to be a war photographer. She doesn't really see how Jesse's going to be able to make it. She's kind of almost worried in that way, but also kind of like condescending and kind of looks down at her. So how is this scene made? Once again, there's this different lighting. You can see how kind of like the younger like person who hasn't like grown yet is kind of in darker, Jesse's in that darker scene, kind of how Jin was in that darker background. And Lee, similar to Saw, has this huge like bright light in the background, like showing how they know more, they're more knowledgeable, wise, and how they're like kind of enlightened. As this scene starts, the background noise phases out, and it kind of highlights how Jesse is just enthralled in this conversation. She is so excited to be talking to like one of her heroes, and everything kind of fades out because of that. Static backgrounds, nothing's moving back there. It helps draw focus to their faces. And there's these over the shoulder shots, kind of give an idea of what each character was seeing. It gives you a better idea of each character's point of view. You can see how Lee is kind of looking down at Jesse, but Jesse is really like looking up at her and admiring Lee, no matter how much Lee might just not really like that or kind of not approve. Why is this scene important? Jesse bounces back really quickly from that protest. There was a huge explosion that she was very close to, and she also gets hit in the face by like a police baton, and she bounces right back. I mean, she's smiling, laughing, like fangirling over Lee. It is, you can see how she doesn't really seem that affected by it. Because of this, Lee doesn't really think she has it. Lee doesn't really think Jesse has it in her to be a war photographer. She kind of sees how she's very bubbly and kind of like almost like happy-go-lucky compared, and it's a huge contrast to how Lee is. And Lee sees her younger self in Jesse and is kind of both like disapproving but also worried, because she knows that that is going to go away for Jesse. You know, she's not going to be able to be that happy and like excited about everything if she's going to be photographing these horrible events that take place. So for scene 2, this is right when they are in the White House. Jesse, Joel, and Lee are in the White House with a group of soldiers, and they're fighting against the very last group of Secret Service, and they're just about to get to the president. I mean, they're super close. So Jesse runs into this hallway to get a picture. And as she goes to get that picture, Secret Service start to turn and are about to start firing. And Lee sees this and she runs out. She pushes Jesse down and saves her, but ultimately sacrifices herself. You can see that upper picture in black and white is a photo that Jesse took, so it's her exact perspective. Jesse's in shock. She slowly sits up, but weirdly, once she gets up, she barely glances back at Lee and then just keeps moving to get that picture of the president. How is this scene made? There's this consistent camera shutter sound. It sounds like a heartbeat. Like it lets you. It's like you can feel how Jesse's heart was like beating out of her chest in this moment. All other sounds fade out. There's gunshots, grenades, yelling, and everything just goes away. There's complete silence, and the camera slowly pans up with Jesse, and she's just left alone with her thoughts in Lee's body. You know, there's no sound. The camera tracks her directly, just this blank face, and it really lets you feel how Jesse's just in her head thinking like, what have I done? What has happened? And one really important thing at the end of the scene is this chromatic aberration effect. The colors on the edge of the scene kind of go a little funky when she looks back at Lee. And that's something that up until this point, only Lee has experienced. And I'll explain that more in the why section, but it's really important. So why is this scene important? Jessie became too confident. She risked too much to get the shot against Lee's advice. And ultimately, it got Lee killed, which is really unfortunate. This scene for Jesse has kind of reached her breaking point, and she essentially turns into Lee. This is that chromatic aberration point. Lee, throughout the movie, has a lot of moments where when she sees something stressful, she kind of has these flashbacks because she has PTSD. And when that happens, there is chromatic aberration around her in the scene. So it's kind of a signal like, oh, she's like flashing back, that she's feeling like PTSD. And this is the first time you see it happen to Jesse, and you realize, oh, Jesse is also going to be haunted by the events that she has captured. But unfortunately, like just like Lee, she has no time to kind of dwell on it or like even think about it. She just has to move on and go photograph the president. She just gets up and, goes to take that picture, but now she knows like, oh, this is gonna stay with me for the rest of my life. So who changed most? As I already said, it's Jesse. At the start of the movie, she has this wide emotional range. She's sad, she's happy, she laughs, she gets excited, she gets scared, and she's really passionate about her photography. She's super excited to be with Joel and Lee and Sammy, being with her hero and these people who are, helping her. She's really excited to be on that journey with them. After the movie, after she goes through all these like horrible events, and right after Lee dies, she's basically unfeeling. Her facial expression is completely blank, and she just gets the shot and tries to get out. She's really realizes why Lee was the way she is, and she's just horrified by these events and just wants to take the picture and move on. She essentially becomes Lee, becomes desensitized to all of the horror and the trauma. And it's a real kind of like negative reverting where she kind of loses a lot of her human aspect and just becomes this kind of like photography machine, kind of like how Lee was. Yeah. Thank you for watching.